Picture yourself on a used car lot this weekend, late afternoon, the light going gold across a row of cars you can actually afford. There is one at the end you keep coming back to. A plain German hatchback, a few $1,000s, nothing on it that turns a single head in the row. And standing 2 spaces down, behind a velvet rope that may as well be a different planet, is the kind of car you have wanted since you were a boy and quietly decided you would never have. The exotic one. The one with the number on the windscreen that has more digits than your house. You feel that small drop in your chest, the one that says the plain car is the realistic car and the dream car belongs to other men. Sit with that feeling for a second, because that feeling is the most expensive thing on the whole lot, and almost everything it just told you about those 2 cars is wrong. A man came into my workshop a few years ago with exactly that feeling sitting on his face. He drove a used Volkswagen Golf, the 6-cylinder one, and he apologized for it. Apologized in my bay the way you would apologize for tracking mud onto a clean floor. Because there was a customer's Porsche up on the lift behind me, and his little Golf looked like a poor relation at a rich man's table. I want you to hold on to him, because he is going to walk back through this whole story, and by the end of it, he is not going to apologize for that car to anyone ever again. The reason is a thing the badge on his bonnet was never going to tell him, and the badge on the Porsche was never going to admit. The most expensive cars on earth, and the cheap one he was ashamed of, are built closer together than any showroom will ever let you see. The badge is the price. The engineering, far more often than they want you to know, is shared. Here is what I mean by shared, said plainly, before anybody can accuse an old mechanic of selling a fairy tale. A modern car maker spends a fortune developing one engine, one platform, one family of parts. The figure for a single exotic engine runs into the hundreds of millions. The Audi and Lamborghini engine I am going to show you cost roughly £110 million to engineer from a blank page, and you do not get that money back selling a handful of supercars. You get it back by quietly bolting the same metal, or the same architecture, or the same supplier's work into a car ordinary people actually buy. The exotic pays for the engineering. The cheap car carries the same engineering to the supermarket. That is the whole trick, and once an old hand at the trade points it out to you, you will never read a price tag the same way again. So let me take you through 5 of these, real ones. The cheap car, and the car behind the rope it secretly shares its blood with. We start with the only one of the 5 where the word on the windscreen is honestly a 7-figure number, because I want to pay that claim in full hard once before anybody doubts the rest. That man's Golf. The plain 6-cylinder Golf he was ashamed of. The engine in it is a strange little thing the engineers call a narrow angle 6. A V so tight, the 2 banks of cylinders share a single head, squeezed that way so a 6 would fit sideways in a small front-wheel drive car where a normal V never could. Volkswagen built it for the Golf in 1991. A clever, compact, slightly awkward solution to a packaging problem in a hatchback. Now hold that picture, because here is where it stops being a hatchback story. A man named Ferdinand Piëch, the engineer who ran that whole empire, looked at that narrow angle design and asked a question nobody sane asks. What if you took that block, and you doubled it, and you turned it into a 16-cylinder? The engineering literature is blunt about it. The famous engine they call the W16, the 8-liter 4-turbocharger heart of the Bugatti Veyron, is built as 2 of those narrow angle banks set at an angle to each other, and the bank it is built from descends directly from the design that debuted in that ordinary 1991 Golf. The Veyron sold new for about $1.7 million. The used ones still ask over $1 million. The Chiron that followed it asks around $3 million. And the great-grandfather of the highest output production engine the world has ever put on a road was the awkward little 6 in the car. A man stood in my bay and apologized for. I told him that, standing there with his keys in his hand, and I watched it land. The whole list of cheap cars carrying borrowed supercar blood, and which ones you can actually buy and run to 500,000 kilometers, is the thing I put in a guide I will name for you shortly, with its cover on your screen, so hold the wanting, and I promise it pays off. Watch the year on this, 1991, because the cheap car came first, and the $1 million one grew out of it, not the other way around. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he asked me the only question that matters. The one you are probably forming right now. If the cheap car and the unobtainable one are this close, which of the cheap ones can I actually buy and keep and trust to 500,000 kilometers? Hold that question, because I sat down and wrote the whole answer to it on paper. Which of these cheap cars with the borrowed supercar blood will run for 20 years on an honest service, and which pretty one will empty your account the first time it sulks? That guide is called The Ones That Last 500,000 Kilometers, and you can see its cover on your screen right now. I will tell you exactly how to put it in your hands and exactly what it costs a little later on, and the number is going to surprise you in the right direction. For now, just keep his question warm, because the next 4 cars are going to keep raising it. Now I leave lineage behind, where the cheap car and the exotic only share a bloodline, and I move to the cars where they share the actual engine. the same metal. The first of those is the Audi R8, and the car behind the rope is the Lamborghini Gallardo, and later the Huracan. People look at those two and see a German Grand Tourer on one side and an Italian supercar on the other, two different worlds, two different prices. The engine does not agree. The 5.2-liter 10-cylinder in the R8 and the 10-cylinder in the Lamborghini are the same engine, sharing somewhere around 70% of their parts. And here is the detail almost nobody quotes. Both of those engines are hand-assembled at the same Audi plant in Győr, in Hungary, around 250 parts, roughly 6 hours of one person's hands per engine. Both cars ride on an aluminium chassis built at the same Audi works in Neckarsulm. The Italian badge and the German badge bolt the same Hungarian-built engine into the same German-built frame and then ask you to believe they are different species. Now, the R8 is not a cheap car, and I will not insult you by pretending it is. It is the cheapest honest door into that exact engine, and as the years take the price down, it becomes the attainable end of a world that used to be sealed shut. If you want the properly cheap carrier of that 10-cylinder family, an older Audi S6 or S8 on the used market is a plain saloon hiding a close cousin of that engine under a very quiet suit. The third one is the one that makes grown men at car meetings go quiet because it sounds like a joke until you check it. The cheap car is a Toyota Camry. The most invisible, sensible get-to-work-and-back car ever built, the 6-cylinder version, the 3.5-liter V6 the engineers call the 2GR. About as exciting as a kettle, and about as likely to break. The car behind the rope is a Lotus, the Evora, the Exogyke, the Emira, a mid-engine British sports car with its motor sitting behind the driver's shoulders like a proper exotic. And the engine behind that driver's shoulders is the Camrys. Toyota sells that exact V6 to Lotus. It has powered the Evora, it powered the Exogyke, and it still sits in the Emira today. Lotus adds a supercharger and that famous chassis magic, and the result will frighten a far more expensive car on a road that bends. But the block, the thing that has to start every morning for 20 years and crosses 400,000 miles without complaint, is the same one hauling groceries in a million driveways. The bulletproof Camry engine behind glass in a car people photograph. If you ever doubted that reliability and exotic can be the same metal wearing two different costumes, there it is. If you have made it this far, you already suspect what I am about to say, that the badge has been doing your thinking for you your whole life, and you are right, and we are only 3 cars in. So let me make good on the promise I held open, because that Golf owner's question, which of these can I actually buy and keep, is the entire reason I sat down and wrote these guides. I spent decades reading the failures and the survivors from the wrong side of a service counter, and I put the whole of it on paper, 3 guides. The $7 fix they charge $900 for, which is the gate-kept cheap repairs and the real service intervals, $19.99. Kill the carbon, save the turbo, the maintenance that stops the famous German failures before they ever start, $29.99, and the one this whole video has been circling, the ones that last 500,000 kilometers, which cheap car carrying real supercar engineering to chase, and which pretty one to walk straight past, $39.99. The 3 of them bundle into the complete German engineering vault for $49.99, down from $207 bought separately, which is $157 off, about 76%. Think about what one wrong used exotic costs you, one shared engine neglected by the man before you, and a single repair on it runs more than that whole vault. That is the loss the vault is built to keep you from. Scan the code on your screen or type fritz.commonguides.com. The founding launch price holds for now while it still holds, and there is a 7-day guarantee, so the only thing you risk is the few minutes it takes to read the first page. These are the years of invoices written down, and you check every interval against your own owner's manual before you trust it. Now back to the lot, because the 4th car is a family sedan with a thoroughbred hidden in the bonnet. The 4th cheap car is a Ford Taurus, the hot version they call the SHO, from the late 1980s and early 90s. A plain American 4-door, the most unassuming thing in any car park. And the 6-cylinder engine under that ordinary bonnet was designed and built by Yamaha, the same Yamaha whose most famous engine is the 10-cylinder in the Lexus LFA, a supercar that asks $375,000 and climbs past that at auction now. Here is the part the dealer who sold that Taurus never knew to tell anyone. That little high-revving Yamaha 6 was originally developed for a mid-engine Ford supercar, a car meant to fight Ferrari and Porsche, a project that got killed before it reached the road. When the supercar died, the engine it was built for did not. Ford dropped that supercar-grade Yamaha heart into a family sedan and sold it to people who only wanted a sensible car that happened to scream to 7,000 revolutions, the cheapest car ever built around the work of a real supercar engine house. Its true twin was never on a price tag at all. It was a supercar that was cancelled, and the only surviving piece of it spent 30 years quietly doing the school run. Now follow that one nerve all the way down to the last car, because this is the one that brings it home, the cheap German muscle saloon and the gullwing behind the rope. The cheap car is a used Mercedes, the 163, the AMG one, the generation built from 2008 onward, a 4-door you can now buy used for the price of a sensible commuter car. Under that bonnet is a 6.2-liter 8-cylinder engine, the engineers call the M156, hand-built, naturally aspirated, the last great AMG 8 before the turbochargers arrived and changed the character of everything. And the car behind the rope, the Mercedes gullwing supercar, the SLS, with the doors that open to the sky, carries the same 6.2 family, a version the engineers call the M159. The gullwing's engine is a breathed-on version of the saloon's, new intake, reworked valve train, a freer exhaust, the same hand-built heart with its sleeves rolled up. The gullwing asked around $190,000 when it was new, and I am careful here, that is a supercar number, not $1 million number, and I will not inflate it for a better story. But the cheap C63 on the used lot and the 6-figure gullwing behind the glass share the last great naturally aspirated AMG 8-cylinder. Near enough the same engine, and only one of them ever made you feel you had to apologize. If you have stayed with me through all 5, you are exactly the kind of person who wants to know what is actually under the metal instead of what the badge wants him to believe. So let me finally tell you the rest of the Golf owner's story and what it cost to walk out of that lot, knowing more than the man selling to you. He never did buy the exotic. He kept the Golf, serviced it the honest way I had just shown him, and he stopped feeling small standing next to anything on wheels. The thing that changed him was only knowing, and knowing is cheap. The car never changed at all. He carried the great-grandfather of a Bugatti to work every morning the same as he always had, and the only difference was that now he understood what he was driving and he held his shoulders a little straighter doing it. Now let me pay off the promise I made you at the start, the biggest one, the one I have been holding back this whole time. I told you the cheap car and the unobtainable one are built closer together than any showroom will let you see, and the deepest proof of that is not any of the same engine stories, clean as they are. It is the lineage one, the Golf and the Bugatti. And here is the part one did not give you yet. The simplest explanation, the one a sensible person reaches for, is that this is just a loose family resemblance, the way distant cousins share a surname. It is not. The narrow angle geometry that let a 6 fit in that hatchback, the exact angle, the shared single head, is the specific engineering idea that made it possible to build a compact 16-cylinder at all. Without the solution Volkswagen worked out for an ordinary 1991 Golf, the engineering path to the highest output production engine ever fitted to a road car does not exist in the form it took. The hatchback was not near the supercar. The hatchback was the seat the supercar grew from. The man who stood in my bay apologizing for his cheap car was driving the ancestor of a Bugatti. And nobody had ever told him, because the entire business of badges is built on you never finding out. So look at that used lot one more time, the plain car at the end, and the exotic behind the rope. Somewhere tonight, an ordinary German 6 is the great-grandfather of $1 million engine, a Camry motor is sitting behind glass in a car people photograph, and a family sedan is hiding a cancelled Supercars heart. While the men who own the expensive badges quietly hope you keep believing the price tag is the engineering. It was never the badge that decided how good the metal was. It was the engineering, and the engineering, far more often than they will ever admit, was shared. The right cheap car, the one carrying real blood, bought knowing and kept honestly, outlasts every reason they gave you to feel small standing next to the dream. If you are the kind of owner who would rather know what is under the bonnet than what is printed on it, the next one I take apart is the badge that quietly buys its whole engine from a company you would never guess and sells it back to you at 4 times the price. Keep your eyes on the metal, not the mark. That is where every one of these stories was really won.